Folks, the freedoms enjoyed here in Israel and in the United States do not exist in many other nations. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom is working to change that. CUFI's Gary Bauer was appointed to the commission by President Trump. He joined us to discuss the fight against growing Christian persecution and anti-Semitism around the world. Take a look. Well, Gary, great to have you back with us here on The Watchman Show.
Great to be here.
You know, you're doing such great work heading up USERF, and you recently had a big victory regarding UNESCO, that anti-Israel body at the UN. Tell us about it.
Yes, USERF is the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, for people that don't recognize the acronym. UNESCO, of course, is well known to anybody that cares about Israel. They're a UN bureaucracy that for some reason over the decades has developed a real animus against Israel. And they were at it again a few weeks ago when they passed a resolution stating essentially that the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Rachel's tomb were Palestinian sites in a future Palestinian state. So I'm serving on this commission, and we normally look at what individual countries are doing, and in this case it was a United Nations commission or committee. But nonetheless, we were having our meeting over at the Holocaust Museum as an appropriate site to be meeting and talking about religious liberty. And we did a little tour. We got back to our meeting room, and I said, you know, given where we are, I think the commission ought to condemn what UNESCO did. And
the Tomb of the Patriarchs, by the way, in Hebron, Gary, look, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs and matriarchs are buried there. Rachel's tomb, of course. In Bethlehem?
All well-known Palestinians. It's amazing, the distortions here. But, you know, the commission's got 9 members, 4 appointed by Democrats, 5 appointed by Republicans, including 3 appointed by the president. And ironically, at a very partisan time, we had a 9-0 vote to condemn UNESCO.
We had recently had the most deadly anti-Semitic attack here in the U.S. In Pittsburgh. Talk about that rise in anti-Semitism around the world, even here in the U.S. to a degree, and how we can fight back against it.
The snake of anti-Semitism has slithered out from underneath its rock again. It's an ancient evil, and it just keeps coming back. We've seen it in Europe with Jews beaten on the streets of the capitals of major European countries. We've seen it at the UN. And sadly, we're seeing it here in the United States on university campuses that, by the way, are supposed to be the epitome of progressive liberal values.
Tolerance.
Yes, Jewish students have been harassed, some of them actually physically attacked. But nothing has gone to the level of this just horrific shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh by an anti-Semitic neo-Nazi. 11 lives lost, and it was roundly condemned, as it should be, by the president and by every decent leader in the United States. Some politics are being played with it. That should never happen. But we really do need to look at why this evil keeps coming up. And I find it so interesting that, as I said, extreme right, some on the left, and also radical Islam all converge at this intersection of promoting and engaging in anti-Semitism.
Yeah, they can all agree, these varying streams of radicalism, Gary, can all agree that they hate the Jews. Yes. We also have Christian persecution, Gary, on the rise, in the Middle East in particular. I know your work throughout your career, you've focused on that a lot, but especially on the commission now, you're really taking a look at that. ISIS obviously decimated these ancient Christian communities. What's the latest for those Christian communities, those beleaguered communities in the Middle East?
Well, fortunately, we have a government right now, from the president to the vice president. The vice president, I would say, is a Christian Zionist, certainly an evangelical. And then you've got people like Secretary of State Pompeo, former Senator Sam Brownback, who's got a position at the State Department dealing with religious liberty. You've got people like Mr. Bolton at the White House. All of them have a concern not only about anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews, hatred of Israel, but also a deep concern about what's happening to Christians in the birthplace of Christianity. And the USERF Commission, many of us on the commission are Christians, and all of us are working together to highlight these dangers in the Middle East, quite frankly, to push the United Nations out of the way and start delivering U.S. aid to Christian communities in the Middle East directly from Washington to those communities, instead of putting it through UN bureaucracies that often don't get it to the people that really need it.
Tell us what makes the U.S. and Israel so unique, especially Israel in that sea of tyranny, as nations that really do have true religious freedom.
My view is that the United States and Israel are the two pillars of Western civilization, or Judeo-Christian civilization. And I think it's the reason we're hated by the same people and why we're both under attack. Our founders, on the way to Constitution Hall, were very well-read men. They had read Greek philosophy and political philosophy, Roman political philosophy. They found some interesting ideas there. But they found the main ideas of the American Republic in the Torah and in the New Testament, where they found we're made in the image of God. So I think the great struggle of the next 100 years will be whether Israel and the United States can stand against these evil forces around the world, along with people in many other countries that believe in the central ideas of Western civilization.
Yeah, Gary, and you have a unique role in that fight now as a commissioner of USCIRF. You've accomplished so much in your career. Talk about why this position, you're a man of strong faith. Talk about why this position is so special to you and so important, obviously appointed by President Trump. But Gary, it seems like you are very well positioned right now on the Commission for International Religious Freedom to make such a difference.
Life has many stages, and I'm in a stage of life now where I've had more years of experience in Washington, D.C. than I would care to admit. Over those years, I've had the chance to do a lot of really incredible things, from the standpoint of a blue-collar kid whose father was a janitor. I worked for Ronald Reagan for 8 years, Undersecretary of Education and so forth. But this appointment by the president, which I didn't seek, which came to me, quite frankly, as a surprise, gives me an opportunity to take all that experience and the things I've done, the people I know on Capitol Hill and at the White House, and really try to move the ball down the field. It's already been an exciting undertaking. We were involved in the release of Pastor Brunson from Turkey, who had been languishing in that jail. And as everybody saw, the president and vice president, I mean, they treated this like a national emergency. They told the government of Turkey, you want to have decent relationships with us, you want to do business with us, release that pastor. So there are things we can do.
And that sent a message to tyrannies around the world, it seemed, Gary. For President Trump, the vice president, to go to bat for Pastor Brunson. Then to see Pastor Brunson pray for the president in the White House, pretty amazing.
When I was watching that, I had to pinch myself, because it was such a natural thing. It was obviously not planned. The president was deeply moved by it. This was a noble and decent and good thing, and something that I think all Americans, whatever their faith, or Americans of no faith, should take some pleasure in.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for joining us and fighting the good fight for religious freedom. We always appreciate it.
It's great to be with you as always.
You too, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, up next, we know that Israel has a biblical claim to Jerusalem. But did you know that it also has a legal claim that would hold up in any court of law? Jay Sekulow joins us after the break to lay it out. Don't move.